Kyle Dubas is a very polarizing figure in Toronto. There's the old school and there's the new school, and Kyle Dubas is definitely part of the new school. I'm going to go over every move that Kyle Dubas made in the last year and give him an overall grade as GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, I'm not going to go in order here of the moves he's made. I'm just going to go from the top of the most significant to the bottom of the least significant and just go from there in this video. I have no idea how long this video is ultimately going to be, but let's start with the Mitchell Marner contract negotiations. He ultimately signed a 6-year deal worth $10.893 million per year. And honestly, when I first saw the Mitch Marner extension, the number was a bit higher than I'm sure Leaf fans would have necessarily liked. But to me, they didn't really have an option here. You had just paid your superstar in Austin Matthews big money, and you knew Marner was going to command in the same ballpark, so I didn't see any way in which Marner got under $9.5 million. So they marginally overpaid Marner as a star winger, but at the end of the day, I really don't think it's going to affect whether or not the Leafs ultimately win a Stanley Cup. There was one interesting stat that popped off for me with Mitch Marner, and that is of all the wingers in the NHL making at least $9.5 million, Marner gets the lowest proportion of his points off his own stick at only 29%. To me, there just seems to be too much of the same thing on this Maple Leafs roster, and Dubas is clearly counting on his theory and building of a franchise to work, and it might one day, but right now it's equated to 0 playoff round victories, and that has to change, or Dubas might be out of a job sooner rather than later. On to the second most significant move on this list, and for me that was firing Mike Babcock in November and promoting Sheldon Keefe. To me, Mike Babcock might go down as one of the most overrated coaches in NHL history. This is a coach that hasn't won a playoff series in nearly a decade, and it's common opinion around the National Hockey League that he was considered a bully to a ton of his players. That might work on some guys, but it's not going to work on everyone, and you're certainly not going to be in the league in 2020 if that is your main coaching tactic. And firing Babcock and promoting Sheldon Keefe, Dubas essentially went all in on his plan with his guys and what he considers to be the model on how to build an NHL franchise. The question now being, is that success only found in the regular season? This was really Dubas' only card to play in this situation here with the plan that he had put in place, so I definitely commend him for the decision, but time will tell if this actually works. Now let's talk about some of the trades Kyle Dubas has made over the past year. February 5th, he acquired Jack Campbell and Kyle Clifford from the LA Kings. Now I like Kyle Clifford, and I think he's a good gritty pickup with solid underlying numbers, which Dubas certainly likes, despite the main focus in the deal here probably being Jack Campbell. The Leafs needed a backup goalie that could get some run and give Frederik Andersen some time off, and I really think moving forward here, the Leafs are going to try to adapt the concept of a 1A and a 1B in net and get away from that number one guy, which I think the NHL is actually transitioning towards. In general, it's hard to see Frederik Andersen being the long-term fit in net for the Toronto Maple Leafs whatsoever. Let's move on to the Nikita Zaitsev trade, and I think Dubas made a solid transaction here, dealing away the monstrosity of a contract that was Nikita Zaitsev, which ultimately Lou Lamoriello gave out to the big defenseman. Having to add Connor Brown to the trade made it a little sour for Leaf fans because I think Brown is the type of player that is actually missing from the Leafs lineup right now, and it sucked that they had to give him away for basically a cap dump in Zaitsev. Now it's hard to envision a scenario where Cody Ceci, a defenseman that also came back in the Zaitsev trade, is a Maple Leaf next year. He'll be a free agent, and it's likely he's going to move on to greener pastures in a different city. Here's one that's certainly a soft spot for Maple Leafs fans right now, and that is the Nazem Kadri and Tyson Barrie trade last summer. I really thought the intention behind this deal at the time made a lot of sense for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but hindsight is always 2020, and looking back on it, especially seeing the success that Kadri is now having in the postseason for the Avalanche, and there is without a doubt a bitter taste being left in Leafs fans' mouths. Kadri wore out his time in Toronto with his tiresome playoff antics, but would you rather see a passive, highly skilled player or ones that are going to get into trouble sometimes but actually leave their heart on the ice like a guy in Nazem Kadri did for Toronto? Ultimately, you have to give to get, and the Leafs thought Kadri was expendable in this type of a trade, and I really did believe that this trade made a lot of sense for the Leafs at the time, especially since Kerfoot could replace Kadri in that 3-hole, but I don't think Kerfoot came as advertised for this Leafs team and brought what he could bring to this lineup. Now, it's hard to fault Dubas for this deal in hindsight, but you wonder if Barrie was the type of defenseman that Dubas should have been targeting to begin with in a deal for Kadri, instead of maybe a more physical guy on the back end like a Jake Muzzin that he got in that deal from Los Angeles. And just as I was about to start filming this video, of course, Kyle Dubas decides to make another trade, and he sent Kasperi Kapanen to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for a first-round pick and prospect Philip Holinder. And I really think this is a good trade for the Maple Leafs. I actually think it's a big overpayment from the Pittsburgh Penguins. So this is another positive move for Kyle Dubas and company. And the Leafs are now back in the first round after trading away their pick to Carolina to get rid of the Patrick Marleau contract. As far as the Marleau trade goes, the Leafs didn't really have any other choice here. They had to get rid of that contract and get some sort of cap space back in return. That's ultimately what this deal was, and although it was an overpayment, Dubas didn't really have any other choice here. Now, since this video is stretching out too far, I think I'm going to cut it off here. I think Dubas and his intentions with the club were pretty clear from the start, and I'm not saying those intentions were wrong. They still are to be determined with the big club. My biggest issue with his plan as GM is that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different result, and Dubas has done that with the big club for the most part during his tenure with the Maple Leafs. The NHL has undoubtedly shifted towards a speed and skill league, and the Leafs have plenty of that in their lineup, but this offseason will be very telling towards how stubborn Dubas is to adjusting his plan on the fly. That's it for me from Cook's Corner. I'm Zach Cook. We'll see you later.